Hello there, I'm David Bradley, and aka Schizophreniforms, and today we are discussing a technique that I came up with to help me when I was not only when I was withdrawing from my medication, which is I posted a recent video about, but also generally through life, because I experienced not unto nominal memory loss when I became fully psychotic. And this meditation technique has helped me to kind of reintegrate those memories over time. I'm going to go more into it in more in depth in the video, but the rough gist is it is a way of reclaiming kind of focus, energy, strength, and emotional resilience from things that are extremely unpleasant that have happened to you in your past. Or and this isn't exclusively for people with schizophrenia. It's just something that might be beneficial when trying to reintegrate memories, and I will explain why that's useful and what it is, and so on and so forth throughout the video. And here we go. So this is part one of the video. The rough explanation for it, as best I can go through. It's a meditation technique where you start out with the last thing that you remember, if you see what I mean. So it's basically it creates the appearance of traveling backwards through time, through your own memories, and then what happens is it kind of I mentioned this in my previous video about reducing my antipsychotics, so this is a sort of follow-up video to my promise that I would make a video about it. Um, and essentially what you do is you revisit memories sequentially. So rather than going up, let's go and find the most traumatic thing that happened and just try and face that memory, without any build-up or tension or emotional kind of navigation of that. And what you would essentially do is you would start with, say, the first memory you have before today. So the first coherent memory you have. So you would normally start with like yesterday. What did I specifically do yesterday that stands out to me about yesterday? And it might be an awful day, it might be a great day, but the purpose of it is to sequentially move step by step. So you might start out with yesterday, and then you think about what's the most significant thing that happened in that week, what characterizes the prior week of your life, and then you might move on to 2 weeks or a month, and so on and so forth. And then as you go down this your own timeline in memory, and this is something you have multiple sittings of. You don't just sit and go straight the way back through your trauma right the way to the beginning of your life in the first session. That's not the point of it. The point is more to gradually build up a sequence of memories, so that as you navigate back down your timeline, say this is the original point, and you navigate backwards, you find that you actually can remember a heck of a lot more than you actually realise. There's way more information in your brain um, about your life, and the initial stage is just getting used to kind of traversing your timeline, getting used to the idea of like, all right, okay, so what happened yesterday? Oh yeah, I went to the park and I had a walk and I drank too much booze. I don't know, not in my case, but you know what I mean. Just like the characteristic thing that stands out of like that was a good thing about that event, and then you also draw in that was a bad thing about that day or whatever, and then you also have what was a good thing about that day. So you kind of make this attribution of the good thing that happened in that sphere of time, the bad thing that happened, and you'll find because one of the functions of memory that have evolved over all of human history is that bad memories or traumatic events are way easy to remember, way easy to remember, and that's because we are geared up and psychologically built to retain memory of those things so we can navigate and avoid them in the future. That's the rough gist. So essentially you might start with the first session just going through yesterday, last week, what was the key memories from last week, what was the good memory and the bad memory of last week, what stands out the most. And then with repeated sittings, you gradually work your way back until you get to the things that you don't want to think about. But you get used to this sequence of going towards it. And the idea is roughly based on this thing called the photograph method, which I actually learned from my dad, which is quite cool. It's basically, if you were to get out an old family album, or like go scrolling through your Facebook feed and you see something from a specific your own page, and you go through a specific memory, that so you might look at something and that you had completely forgotten about, and you see like, oh yeah, that was that toy truck I had when I was like 7 or something. You're like suddenly flooded with these incredibly powerful memories of it that you were basically dormant, and you would then deliberately think about that thing until it becomes just boring and mundane. Basically, that's the rough gist. So what starts out as like an incredibly vivid memory becomes just like part of the tapestry of your existence, and we're trying to apply this gradually to your entire timeline so that you can rebuild a picture of your identity, your psyche, your memory forms. And then the other interesting thing that you can do in that is that when you go into the memory while you're doing this, especially the traumatic or vivid ones, what you want to do is kind of, you sit in meditative repose, so you have your eyes closed and you try and gradually allow the memory to become as vivid as you can handle each time, and that how much you can handle will get exponentially larger as it becomes more and more experientially available to you. And what you do is say for me there might have been like a very disempowering memory where someone's really hurt me, and we all know this feeling, I think, schizophrenic or not, when you are remembering something where someone really wronged you or really annoyed you or really upset you, and it's like you can go into whole conversations with that person in your head in that moment, and that's a natural tendency. You basically relive and argue with the people in the events. Like, it's such a common experience. Like, you might not recognize it yourself, but for a lot of people it's very common to basically perpetuate arguments with people and continue talking to them in your head, almost completely out of control. And what we're doing is hijacking that ability, and then we're bringing love at it. We're coming from a very serene state. So you're deep in meditation, you're deeply relaxed before you even go into this process at all. And you might be guided through it. This could be a therapeutic technique, I don't know. But like, I've tried this on friends very briefly, but I've mostly done it to myself. It's like, you bring an element of like voluntary calm to the experience. It's like, I'm going in here to fix something so that I can take something back that's valuable. And what I find is that if you have a degree of calmness and serenity and bravery going into it, that basically what happens is, if you imagine your mind like an energy sphere, I'm not saying it is, but you just imagine hypothetically for this process, that like anything that's being pushed out of that sphere of energy is actually taken away from your willpower, like your like core of yourself, like in your willpower. I mean, the willpower is quite a commonly used term, and it's like, if you're rejecting a memory, if you're rejecting an experience, if you're blocking something out, that's actually consuming daily or minute by second by second by second or whatever. Even if it's a tiny fraction of your willpower, that is energy of yours, your heart, your mind, your soul, whatever you consider it, that is taking a part of your focus to repress that consciously, right? So if you can go into this situation calmly, warmly, lovingly, with a sense of non-judgment of yourself, a sense of compassion for whoever may have wronged you or whatever situation caused this harm, and the more you integrate it, basically, the more you don't need to suppress it. That's one of the benefits, and I'll come on to section 2 in a minute of how it can help. But that's one of the benefits, is that the more you are not blocking things out, and the more you can cope with the reintegration of those memories, the more willpower you have, the more energy you have. And it's been a wonderful, amazing resource for me, this exercise, which is why I'm making a video about it. So I'll come on to how it can help very shortly. So how can it help? So we briefly kind of covered the primary mode in which I found it useful, which is in the last section, which is it regains elements of your willpower. It regains elements of your experience. Now I kind of learned a bit of this. This whole technique has come up from like various different little avenues of psychotherapy I've either had or researched, or like NLP techniques or various other things that I've learned about. And but so the main thing I find is that you regain your energy, your willpower from these traumatic memories. Like, you no longer need to filter out or block out experience itself. Because in the case of traumatic memories, these things are like, they're not quite, I think the way I had it described to me is they're not quite been integrated into the part of the cerebellum. I can't remember. I won't do the science side of it, but the basic gist is that traumatic memories just like kind of linger because they haven't been filed. They haven't been like kind of put in a system of understanding so that they can be integrated as part of your memory. And so that's a side note. But like, what I find is that the more you can revisit a memory that you don't want to revisit, that you shouldn't revisit, and this maybe is something you can do with a therapist. You know what I mean? Like, talk to them about this if it comes up, or you can just do it yourself if you feel comfortable and calm, and you can get in that serene state. Perhaps you've, you know, done a meditation in the past, or a mindfulness meditation. That can be an extremely useful way to go into it. But yeah, this regaining of energy, this regaining of willpower is just like central to why I did it. And it can help in that regard because, like I said, if you're blocking something out, that, whether you know it or not, that takes part of your willpower to do that. And now you see this with people with chronic depression as well. They're just so flat and drained and exhausted. And it's not only because they have predatory thoughts coming in, or like these kind of repetitive thought modes going through their mind's eye, or their internal narrative. That's one aspect of depression. The other aspect is just like all their strength and energy is just going into just blocking out how much things have sucked. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many people I've known who suffered from depression where it's like their perception of reality is completely accurate, but they're unable to handle that experience, you know? And actually, quite often with people with depression, it is perfectly reasonable to feel depressed, given the scenario you're in, the experiences you've had. But the problem comes in the non-acceptance of that experience. Like, people don't let themselves cry. That's like, especially for men, that's a commonly chronic thing. It's just not being allowed, like feeling like there's something wrong with you because you're devastated. It's like you might have a bereavement, you might have lost your job, you might be in a fucking sucky situation, and you're resisting the emotion that you really should feel. That if you do feel, you will find it's cathartic. Do you know what I mean? Like, so this is a similar thing. Is like with memories of trauma or abuse or violence or whatever. We don't want to revisit those memories. We can't. It's harrowing and it's horrible, and you might need support doing that. But one of the things that does happen is that, like, for example, characteristically, as soon as you, like, probably while I'm talking about it now, if you've got a traumatic memory, your brain will be going, hello, yeah, that's the memory. And you're like going, oh, the fuck, right? And that, you can feel yourself, in some regard, willing away that experience. And eventually to reintegrate, and this is something I've had to do to be able to reduce my medication, to stay sane, to process life in general. You need to be able to reclaim that memory effectively to be part of your life story, and this is a way that can possibly help do that. And you find one of the net benefits of it, how it's helped me. So this section is about how it can help, is that the emotional intensity of the reaction to that, and the rejection and repression of that memory, takes up way more mental effort than you actually have perhaps considered. That's why it can be quite like vivid and intense to revisit it, is because it, like, the memory is in your body as well. It's in your mind, it's in your thoughts, and all you're resisting all of this emotional energy, and then when it comes back to you, when you reclaim it through this process of gradually reintroducing the concept of it, and then the feeling of it, and then the quite relivable experience of it, eventually, as that starts to numb down and become just more commonplace and a more just normal part of your cognition, and this has worked for me beautifully with some really horrible memories, you find that energy kind of withdraws into you, and you suddenly like, oh wait, I actually have more strength now, because like I've got the confidence to say I can handle that memory, I can handle that experience happened to me, stuff like that, and it just bolsters your willpower and it makes you much, much stronger. So that's how it can help. So as you've probably gathered from what I'm saying, is that this is something that if you are unstable or struggling, might be worth doing with the therapist. Like you could, I don't know whether this is a bit self-indulgent of me, but you can maybe take this concept to them and say, look, this guy's had this experience, and maybe we could approach it. Like obviously not necessarily my method, but like there's re-narrative therapy, there's NLP, um, there's hypnosis. There's loads of ways in which you can do this. Mindfulness-based cognitive behavioural therapy is just like a toolkit for people that anyone should have that toolkit. But especially if you've got a harsh memory to deal with, there's loads of ways you can approach it. But I want to talk about the risks briefly now. So it's like the potential of this is that you may be partially or fully re-traumatized by the memory. Let's be perfectly honest. That is the risk. Like if you do this not through meditation, not with support of perhaps your mental health team or medication or sedatives even. Like because when I've approached particularly bad memories, like I have anti-anxiety tablets available to me. So if it gets too bad, like in this process, I have the option of taking them, which I haven't needed to in a lot of regards. But there's some memories that I've had that are so bad where I haven't needed to use those things. And if you do this unprepared and unthought out, there's potential for the experience of reliving a traumatic memory, especially the first time if it's repressed, can be like harrowing as shit. And I would be wary about doing that straight off the bat. So I just wanted to kind of include this briefly in this concept. Is like it's not like fun. It's like there's net positive results, but the actual process of kind of doing it is not like a fun activity that's going to be really fun for the family. Like it's like no, this is it's not that serious, but like it's something that it's to be taken seriously. Like if you actually engage in it, like re-embracing your memories, and yeah, there's a potential that you could be re-traumatized by those memories. So that's just something to bear in mind. I thought I'd cover that as a little addendum or a little intermediary section. So I'll be back with the next section. So with all that in mind, how have I personally benefited and used this process to help me with my basically schizophrenia symptoms? And so I've got a few notes here. I've got so the first one is to rebuild my memories. So one thing that happened to me quite as a particular point why this is so useful for me was like before I became acutely psychotic, there was a huge blank. Like I lost a lot of memories. I think I damaged my brain quite significantly, and you can find out more about how that happened in the Story of Schizophreniforms video. But I lost a lot of memory, and it was like quite aggressively repressed. Plus, I think there was maybe some brain damage involved there that kind of, because it was literally like I woke up from the experience like, kind of recognize people, but they're like third-hand memories and stuff, and it's like so like really dissociated from it. And I gather that's quite common in the trauma associated with schizophrenia, is this profound sense of dissociation, as though you're watching someone else's memories, but you don't relate to them as though you're yours. They're yours. You don't have any ownership of those memories in the same way that you would have had prior to the trauma. And that's just one of the ways the mind kind of adapts to trauma and kind of learns to navigate things. Is like it creates this unhealthy but useful distance between yourself and your emotions, and the emotions attributed with the memory and the memory itself. So it helped me reassociate. Basically, that's what I'm saying. It helped me rebuild like certain phases of my memory that were so extreme in one direction, good or bad. These can be good memories as well, but just such extreme memories that even now I'm constantly reintegrating new memories. It's a process I'm deliberately working on because I know it benefits me. And yeah, it basically helped me rebuild my timeline, which was a novel experience. It helped me reconnect with who I was prior to psychosis. Like all the latent potential there, all the memories there. Like I think I mentioned in the previous video about reducing my medication, that it helped me restore memories of like how to play the bass properly, and loads of scales and theory and novel kind of experiences that were locked down in this wall of kind of, no, I can't do that, like traumatization and dissociation. So that's one way in which it's benefited me. The other way is to kind of heal my mind quite a lot. So not just the memories itself, but the actual thing that the memories exist in, which is like it's made it so that as a knock-on effect, I can like apply this approach to near enough any memory, and then that actually has two functions. One, it increases my capacity to recall events, which is fascinating. It's like having an extra layer of memory. It's like a new mental capacity, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But also it kind of brought me in alignment with myself, because it's like, if I'm constantly rejecting said memory or experience, or constantly dissociated from my experience, there's this like lack of alignment. It's like I know one thing to be true, but it's not integrated into who I am as a person. And then that, some quite visceral emotions came up with some of this stuff, and it was like, it meant that this reintroduction of certain aspects and certain memories and certain processes, certain things that happened, kind of made me just more honest with myself. And being honest is a really important thing in this. It's like, how did I behave? How did they behave? Were they really the evil person I thought they were? Were they really as sadistic as I thought? And in some cases the answers to that is yes. And in some cases the answer to that is like, maybe not. Like, maybe they were just in a fucking sucky situation as well, and crazy shit happened. Like, there's loads of ways in which that can apply to so many scenarios. And coming at it from this compassionate kind of, using the metta bhavana, that's a meditation technique that you can quickly Google, MHETTA space BHAVANA, metta bhavana, a loving kindness meditation. Doing that as part of this process as well, like cultivating the feeling of love and then slowly extending it to people with less and less emotional connection with you, or with extremely negative emotional connections, until you can have a degree of compassion for everyone. I can maybe cover that in another video if it's of interest to people. But it's kind of, it's just brought me more in line with myself, because it's like just identifying as myself and my experiences unashamedly kind of gives me this like real alignment, like a real sense of like, I do know who I am, and I do know what I'm capable of, I do know what I can endure. And that's a really, really useful thing, to know yourself, to know exactly what, who, why you are the way you are, like, and just having the confidence with that. So that's been really useful. And then so the other side of it is reintroducing new mental capacities. So like, I know, for example, I've seen this across the board, like people who are musicians and then they get put on antipsychotics because of trauma and developing schizophrenia or psychosis. And it's like, in my case, this was a really useful thing, is like slowly being able to handle more and more of these traumatic memories, within which lie my ability. Basically, the ability to accept these memories meant that the interstitial kind of layers of memory in between that, like all the theory I learned and some of the wonderful things that happened, and some of the interesting processes that I've developed that were basically blocked out by the antipsychotics, like jazz soloing, for example, something I'm very competent at with less meds in my system, and it's becoming reintegrated, and it's absolutely like heartbreakingly good times that I've kind of managed to get that level of reintegration of those memories that I can now play fluidly. It's like, even now it makes me want to cry. Like, it's such a wonderful thing. And for others it could be something completely different. It could be a sport they were good at, it could be speaking, it could be something as simple as just like feeling affection, because in people that have experienced repeated trauma, violence, abuse, negativity, that capacity for love is naturally diminished. Like, it's locked down. Like, you lock down your heart for a reason, because heartbreak hurts like fuck, and you know being hurt by people that you really care about, or even just in general, really makes you lock down your heart. And like that subtle opening of the heart that can happen, that can just have such positive net end goal improvements in your life when you can just love a little bit more than you ever thought you could before. Just that little bit more, you know, it's amazing. Yeah, so that's how I've used it. We covered, are there risks, how can it help, and what is it? I think that's it for now. I may do a video demonstrating like a guided meditation. If people comment and say that's something they want, I can do a guided meditation of how this works. But I just wanted to talk about this a little bit because I mentioned it in the previous video. But I'm kind of running out of time, so I'm going to end there. I'm David Bradley, aka Schizophreniforms. Please, if you like what you see, click the like button. I would be sad if you click the dislike, but that also benefits me anyway, so I don't really mind. Share the video with people you think it might be interesting for, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I've been David Bradley, aka Schizophreniforms. Peace.